Hi, I'm Chris, and this is the 10-Minute Writer. Quick tips for improving your writing craft. And why should you listen to me? Well, I'm the author of over 100 children's books, including historical fiction, fantasy, science fiction, suspense, and ghost stories, as well as 24 adult books, romance, mystery, and suspense. And I have taught writing workshops around the world and online. So today's quick tip involves the promise of the first chapter. So you will want your book to grab readers' attention right away. And one of the ways it can do that is by letting the reader know what the rest of the book is going to contain. So in your first chapter, you want to quickly identify the genre, especially if it is something unusual like historical fiction, fantasy, or science fiction, basically anything that's not today, here, and now. But you also want to give other hints of the setting, even if it's a contemporary realistic novel. Is it going to take place more in the workplace or at school or at home? Is it going to be on vacation? Is it going to be in a sort of a big city or a smaller community or a rural setting? So let the reader know quickly kind of where we are and when we are. And if you have fantasy elements or science fiction elements, you want to at least give a hint of them as early as possible. The first chapter should also introduce the main character. Now, if you have multiple main characters, you may not be able to get them all in the first chapter, but we want to know at least one person that we will be on this journey with. And ideally, you get a bit of that main character's goal or problem with a bit of tension. Now, often you can't introduce the main problem of the book right away because the character can't come across it yet. Something is going to happen that is going to change things for them, give them a problem to solve or a new opportunity. So you can't always start right in the middle of the main book problem, but you can start with some kind of problem, perhaps one that relates to the main story. A great example is Raiders of the Lost Ark. Indiana Jones, the main problem is finding the Ark of the Covenant, but that requires a long meeting with the government people and talking about what the Ark of the Covenant is and the fact that Hitler's looking at it for it and a bunch of other things. And it's not the most exciting scene in the movie. So instead of starting there, the movie starts with Indiana Jones trying to retrieve this golden idol head. And that lets us get to know who he is as an adventurer, not just a professor. And it opens with plenty of action and touches of humor. So the reader gets a promise that the movie as a whole is going to be like this opening scene. And that helps them then relax and sit through the longer, quieter scenes, explaining everything that we need to know before he can get off on his main challenge. So try to find a way of opening with a character who has a problem or a goal, and ideally one that sort of reflects the main goal somehow. You also want to establish the point of view. That can be very straightforward, like first person narrator versus third person. But if you're doing anything unusual, like if you have multiple viewpoint characters, you may not want to have that in the first chapter because you may want to have, say, alternating chapters in his or her point of view is common for romance. But make sure that you are letting the reader know relatively quickly that this is happening. So it's not jarring as it would be if they maybe were in one character's viewpoint for 5 chapters and then switched. If there's anything unusual about the structure, you also want to identify that as quickly as possible. If you're going to have, say, letters or text messages or newspaper clippings or something that are part of the story, or if you're having graphics, you want to let the reader know about that fairly quickly so that they know what they're getting and what you're promising. And then there's the tone or voice, and pacing as part of that. So whether this is going to be a humorous, lighthearted novel or something more serious, whether it's sort of fast-paced and direct language or whether it is more poetic and lyrical. Just the kind of book that the reader is going to get. And here's where people sometimes trip up. We know that we want to grab the reader's attention right away. We want to get the book off to a fast start. And so sometimes people will find some kind of action dramatic scene to open when their book isn't that kind of book. So you want to make sure that you are promising what you deliver and delivering on what you promise. So if your opening chapter says this is going to be a funny action book, then the rest of the book should be the same. If your book is actually a quieter story with a lot of lyrical language, you want to promise that in the first chapter so the reader knows what they're getting. Imagine a reader in a bookstore picking up your book, looking at the opening couple of pages. You want the right reader to fall in love with those opening pages. And if you're giving the wrong promise, you might have readers pick up the book thinking they're going to like it and then being disappointed and getting bad reviews. And you might have readers who really would love the book putting it down again because the opening scene is not promising them what they want. So I have some various covers here kind of to reinforce that. All of these things work together. The title, the cover, and that opening chapter help tell the reader what kind of book this is, whether it's historical or modern, fantasy or science fiction, but also whether it's humorous and playful or whether it's more serious, what the audience age range is, and so forth. So all of those things work together. I got some of the idea for the promise of the first chapter from my friend Suzanne Morgan Williams, who is the author of Bull Rider, as well as some other books. And this is how Bull Rider starts. I'm going to read it aloud since some people may be on devices where they can't read it very well themselves. Folks in Salt Lick say I couldn't shake bull riding if I tried. It's in my blood, my family. Around here, any guy named Camamara should be a bull rider. But if you've ever looked a 1,600-pound bucking bull named Ugly in the eye and thought about holding onto his back with stiff rawhide handle, some pine tar, and a prayer, well, you'd know why I favored skateboarding. So look at the promise in that opening. Genre, it lets you know it's probably contemporary and probably a young adult novel since it's a skateboarder who has some family tension. Setting, you may not know if Salt Lick is even a real town, but you can probably imagine that it is a very small town in a rural community because there's bull riding, probably in the American Southwest or West. You get the main character's name. You don't necessarily have to give their name in the opening paragraph. If it's a first-person narrator, but she works it in there very smoothly. And you don't know really what his goal or problem is for the book, but this is not even the first chapter. This is just the opening paragraph. And already there's some hint of a problem where there's family pressure or community pressure for him to go into bull riding, but he actually prefers skateboarding. So maybe he doesn't quite fit in. You know the point of view, first person narrator, and you get a great voice. Really sounds like a young person from this kind of background. So all that can be done in just a paragraph. You have a little more than that, but try to figure out how you can make these promises and establish all of these things as quickly as possible. So if you would like to practice a bit more, an exercise you can do is to grab some published books, look at some of your favorite books or what you have on the shelf, and look at their opening scenes. What do they promise? What can you get from that opening scene in terms of genre, main character, point of view, tone, and all of those things? And then do the books fulfill that promise? And how so, or how do they fail? This short clip is part of my longer class on advanced plotting, which you can get online. It has a longer video about the promise of the first chapter with more examples, and then also videos on fast starts, characters in conflict, how to pack the plot full, whether or not you're writing an action novel or a romance or something quieter, how to analyze your plot to make sure it's working, and then some things on cliffhangers and pacing. And that includes 6 videos plus handouts. if you're interested in getting that now as an online class to do at your own pace, you can go to my Chris Ebach website, and the For Writers tab will have more information and a way to sign up for that. So that's it for today. Follow my channel if you would like to get more 10-minute writer tips. I'll try to post one about every week.